How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Beis, Daf 12 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, Pigul is back. Bigadol. It's back, very much back. We are going to learn 2 Mishnayos today and complete that. My plan is to complete the first parak of Masechta Menachos. Amazing. We're making some big strides here. Masechta Menachos. We're gonna hopefully complete the first parak of Masechta Menachos. We'll learn 2 Mishnayos, both of them about Pigul. We are well prepared for Pigul because we prepared ourselves in Masechta Zvachim. The sugyas that we are going to see today are sugyas that not entirely, but enoughly we've seen in Masechta Zvachim as pertains to Pigul. I'm sure there will be a lot that is familiar. There will also be a lot that's not familiar and very difficult. Okay. Was there anything else? Oh, yeah. Should we talk about what the Daf talks about? Okay, fine. Pigul, great. Finishing the first parak, amazing. Even the next parak also really kind of continues talking about Pigul a little bit. Friends, on today's Daf, all about Pigul from Menachos, a big Mishnah. A lot of the Yud Beis and Aleph is going to be a big Mishnah. And then the Gemara for the first Mishnah, for the big Mishnah that we're going to learn today, is very challenging. Very, very difficult. It talks about Pigul when the leftovers are depleted. We discussed the other day what happens when, after the kometz is taken, but before it's burnt, the shiari hamincha, the shirayim become depleted. So there's machlokes. What happens? Do you burn it? Do you not burn it? Do you eat it? Whatever. How does that pertain to Pigul? It's confusing. It's tricking. It's difficult. That is the second section of today's daf. And the third and final section of today's daf that should take us to the end of the parak is the Pigul marriage between burning and eating. Again, it's a sugya that we are familiar with from Masechta Zvachim about a chatzizais, v'lechol chatzizais, v'lahaktir kachatzizais. So we will get to that, and that should propel us to the end of the first chapter of Masechta Menachos. Friends, let's go get it. Friends, we begin on Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, about 5-10 lines from the bottom at the Mishnah. Zok the Mishnah, Kemetz is a mincha, somebody who takes a kometz, a fistful from a korban mincha, lechol shiareh b'chutz, Pigul. I'm saying that. It doesn't say Pigul in the Mishnah. But Pigul. We are talking about Pigul. We have spent plenty of time talking about Pigul in Masechta Zvachim. We are no strangers to Pigul. Somebody who takes a kometz, if a kohen takes a kometz from a mincha, with the intention of eating the shiaria mincha, right? With the mincha, you take the kometz, you burn it, you burn the levona as well. And then the leftover flour offering remnants are eaten by the priests, are eaten by the kohanim. If the intention was to eat the shiaria mincha, we're talking about chutz l'mkoma right now, so outside of the azara. So, kazais mishiaria, where am I? Le'echol shiaria b'chutz, kazais mishiaria b'chutz, or even just a kazayis of the leftovers b'chutz. It's fine. It's interesting. Now already, we learn. When we learned about Pigul in Masechta Zvachim, we hadn't yet learned about shchutei chutz. That was a very tricky sugya that we encountered at the end of Masechta Zvachim. It's interesting to think about shchutei chutz as well, right? We talked about these things about eating a kazayis b'chutz. It's going to come up in today's daf as well. So here we're talking about b'chutz in the context of Pigul taking a kometz from the mincha with the intention of eating the shiaria mincha outside of the azara. Okay. Fine. So to eat either the shiraim or just the kazayis of it outside of the azar, lehaktir komtza b'chutz, to be maktir the kometz b'chutz, right? That's like the shchutei chutz kind of stuff, right? Be maktir kometz b'chutz. The thing is maktir here. This is Pigul because you're just having kavana, right? So you take the kometz while you're scooping up the kometz, you have kavana that you're going to burn the komets outside of the azar, or kazayis, mi komtza bachutz, or to burn just the kazayis of the komets bachutz, or lahakti levonosa bachutz, or to burn the levona of the mincha bachutz. Posel vein bakaris. In all of those scenarios, because it's talking about chutz limkomo, the mincha is posel, but there's no chiyuv karis. Now we're going to get to chutz lizmano, which of course is where there's a chiyuv karis as well. If, however, the kavana when taking the komets was lechol shiarei lemocher, to eat the shiarei mincha tomorrow, or kazayis mishiarei lemocher, or a kazayis of the shirayim, the shiarei mincha tomorrow, which is chutz lizmano, because a mincha you have only that day to eat it, not the next day. So tomorrow is already chutz lizmano. Mikom tzalamacho lakti levonosa. Where am I? Did I skip? Probably. Lahaktir kom tzalamacho kazayis mikom tzalamacho, to burn the komets. To burn the komet, right? So you scoop out the komets with the intention of burning it tomorrow, or even just a kazayis of it tomorrow, or laktir levonosa tomorrow, or to burn the frankincense tomorrow. Pigul v'chayav and alav karis. So in that case, it's pigul, and there is a chiyuv karis. All stuff that we are familiar with, right? In Zvachim, it was about slaughtering and doing Zrikas Adam. Here it's about taking the mincha and burning the mincha. Burning the komets, burning the levona, eating the shiarei mincha. Ze'aklal, this is the rule. Kol akomets, anybody who takes a komets, o nosein b'chli, or deposits the komet in nesina b'chli, deposits the komets in a vessel, a molich, or brings the vessel up to the mizbeach, hamaktir, or burns the komets on the mizbeach, lechol davar shedarku lechol, with the intention of eating something that is normally eaten, or to burn something that is normally burnt, right? Things that are normally eaten in the context of mincha would be the shiarei mincha. Things that are normally burned would be the komets, would be the levona. Chutz limkomo posel vein bokaris, if the intention is to do these activities outside of where they're supposed to be, outside of the azara, outside of the azara. So posel, the korban is posel, and there's no chiyuv karis chutz lizmano. But if the intention is outside of its proper time, then of course pigul v'chayav and alav karis, then there is a chiyuv karis. Uvavachi akiv matir kimitzvaso. Also, what we are familiar with from Masechtas Zvachim, so long as the matir is offered kimitzvaso. Rashi quotes a beautiful limud that apparently we're going to learn on Daf Tes Zayin. I'm going to read it for you. It's in the Rashi Dibur Maskil Vavache Karib Amatir Kimitzvaso, about 20 lines into Rashi. It says, I'm like kind of towards the end of that Rashi. It says, Yerotze ksiv bepigul. It says by pigul Yerotze, Uchsiv be kosher Yerotze, and also says by a korban that's kosher Yerotze karsoas kosher kachaytsoas pigul. That just like it's interesting, just like a korban that is kosher, so too is pigul, right? As we've learned about, right? Because we've learned about, of course, right? So if you were to take the komets, right? If you take the komets, and when you take the komets, you have in mind that you're going to eat the shiarei mincha chutz lizmano. It's not yet pigul, right? In order for it to actually become pigul, you have to do the rest of the steps properly. So you took the komets, now you have to do nesina b'kli, olacha, aktara, all kosherly, as we're going to learn all about right now. And that's and we're learning it out from just like right. We say yerotze. By a kosher korban it says yerotze, and it says by pigul yerotze. Just like a kosher korban, you have to offer it properly. So also a pigul, once you've kind of done that initial pigul step, the rest of the korban has to be offered properly. So what does that look like? So Kate said, how so? So Kate said, where am I? Okay. Kate said, what does it mean that the rest of the steps are done properly? If when he took the komets from the mincha, there were no problems. He didn't have any improper thoughts. All was quiet on that end. Nosan bakli v'holech v'hiktir chutz lizmanu. But then, when he put the komets into the vessel and or brought it to the mizbeach and or burnt it on the mizbeach, chutz lizmanu, with the intention of chutz lizmanu, or when he did the kmitza, he had intention of chutz lizmanu, let's say to eat the shiara mincha chutz lizmanu. Nosam bakli v'holech v'iktir b'shtika, and then all the other steps. Nisina bakli halacha haktara, he didn't have any particular kavana, like kosher kavanas, all good. Or shekamatz v'nosam bakli v'holech v'iktir chutz lizmanu, or that he did all of the avodas, right? I think there's kind of two ways to understand it. It's not super clear to me exactly what it means. I feel like it could mean either one of two things. Either he does all four of the avodas, Kemitza, Nesina Bakli, Olacha, and Aktara, with the same intention of Chutz Lizmanu. Alternatively, he does any one of them with the intention of Chutz Lizmanu, and then the rest of them he's quiet. So this is Karv Matik Mitzvah. So basically, when it comes to Karv Matik Mitzvah, so it means either one, it means that, if I understand correctly, it means one or more steps were done with machshavas chutz lizmano, and whatever steps were not done with machshavas chutz lizmano were done with no problematic intention at all. Okay, so whether whether it's like one of the steps that were done with machshavas chutz lizmano, and then all the other ones were done with kosher intentions, or all of them were done with machshavas chutz lizmano. I'd imagine also if one or two or three of them were done with machshavas chutz lizmano. But kilu, as we're going to see now, once already you start mixing it with like machshavas chutz limkomo, or even let's say shelo lishma by a minchas chote kilu. Once already you start mixing and matching with other issues, well then already it's not karv matik mitzvah. But if we're just saying that the only issue with this korban is chutz lizmano, I think that would be. And then any other step that wasn't chutz lizmano was kosher, so then it would be pigul, and you'd be chayiv kares. Keitzad lo karv matik mitzvah. And what are examples where it's lo karv matik mitzvah? So kamatz chutz limkomo. Okay, so if you do kmitza with the intention of chutz limkomo, nosem bechli v'holech viktir chutz lizmano, and then all the other steps, or even I think any of the other steps you did with machshavas chutz lizmano, so that would be lo karv matik mitzvah, so because there was chutz lizmano, but also mixed into the intentions were chutz limkomo. Or shekamatz chutz lizmano, or the kmitza was chutz lizmano. However, nosem b'chli v'holech viktir chutz limkomo. But with the other steps, you mixed in chutz limkomo. So now you have chutz lizmano and chutz limkomo. Or shekamatz nosem b'chli v'holech viktir chutz limkomo. Or if you did everything chutz limkomo, well then obviously you're not going to be chayiv kares because there's no chutz lizmano there at all. Zeush lo karv matik mitzvah. So in those examples, that would be lo karv matik mitzvah. So that would not qualify as a chiyuv kares for pigul. Minchas chote u minchas knos. Now also, there's another angle here, which is when it comes, as we learned in the first Mishnah of Masechta Menachos, when it comes to minchas chote, which of course is a korban mincha that somebody brings when it comes to korban ola v'yored that we learned about Masechta Shavuos, whether Shavuos bitui, Shavuos ha'edus, tumas mikdash v'kalashav, if all they can afford is a flour offering, so they would bring a minchas chote or a minchas knos that a sota brings. So we learned in the first Mishnah of Masechta Menachos that for those two examples, minchas chote and minchas knos, a kavan of shelo lishma is ruinous, makes the korban possible. So minchas chote and minchas knos shekmotzon, that the komets was shelo lishman, nosem b'chli v'holech viktir chutz lizmano, and then all the other steps were chutz lizmano. Or shekometz chutz lizmano, or the komets was chutz lizmano, nosem b'chli v'holech viktir shelo lishman, but the rest of the steps were shelo lishman. Or shekometz v'nosem b'chli v'holech viktir shelo lishman, or all the steps were shelo lishman. Zeh shel karv matik mitzvah. So in those examples, it was not karv matik mitzvah. So again, in order for it to be karv matik mitzvah, you will have chutz lizmano and no other psuls. all of the other steps will be either also chutz l'zmano or no offensive kavana at all. Lecho kazayis b'chutz kazayis l'mocher. Now, if the intention was, so he takes the komets, and the intention is, as he's taking the komets, I'm going to eat one kazayis of the shirayim outside of the azara and one kazayis of the shirayim tomorrow. Kazayis l'mocher, kazayis b'chutz, or punkt fakert. One kazayis I'm going to eat tomorrow, one kazayis I'm going to eat outside of the azara. Kachatzi zayis b'chutz, kachatzi zayis l'mocher. Half a zayis outside of the azara, half a zayis tomorrow. Kachatzi zayis l'mocher, kachatzi zayis b'chutz, punkt fakert. Half a zayis tomorrow, half a zayis outside of the azara. Pasul. Then of course in all of those combinations, pasul, keilu. There's no chiyuv kares there. Rabbi Yehuda says, this is the rule. Im machshavas azman, again, this is straight, we saw this in Masechtas Zvachim. I imagine that all of the friends here at Babble on Talmud are saying, oh yeah, this is super familiar. It might be painfully familiar, painfully obviously in the best possible, struggling through the holy Gemara, that kind of pain, the pain of Adam Kiyamus Ba'oil, Ein Divitar Niknin El Mi Shayamus El Mi Shememis Atzmo. That kind of a pain, the most beautiful pain that there is. So we were all, basically everything in this Mishnah should be familiar. Rabbi Yehuda says, if the machshava of chutz l'zmano is the first machshava, right? So if he has a kavanah to eat a kazayis l'mocher, followed by a kavanah to eat a kazayis outside of the azara, well, that's a machshavas azman, kadam machshavas hamakom. If the first intention was chutz l'zmano, pigul b'chayavana, of course. Well then, chutz l'zmano is pigul. In machshavas hamakom, kadam machshavas azman. But if the machshava of place preceded the machshava of time, well then possible makaris, it's possible, and there's no chiyuv karis. V'chacham zevazeh possible makaris. Whereas the chacham, as we saw, say that the order, it doesn't matter. If he has both the intention of chutz l'zmano together with the intention of chutz l'mkomo, so whether it was chutz l'zmano, chutz l'mkomo, or chutz l'mkomo, chutz l'zmano, makes no difference. Possible, no chiyuv karis. And as Rashi points out, and I believe we probably made the same distinction in Masechtas Zvachim, that Rabbi Yehuda argues with the rabbis both when it is on the one avoda. So, for example, he takes the komets with the intention of eating a kazayis of the shirayim outside of the zara and a kazayis tomorrow, or whether he does the kmitza with machshavas, let's say chutz l'zmano, and then the holacha with machshavas chutz l'mkomo. Kilu, regardless of the order, kilu, the point is machlokes. It's the same machlokes whether these kavanas are on while doing one avoda or while doing more than one avoda. Friends, now we get to the very tricky Gemara, which is pigul when the leftovers are depleted. Says the Gemara, Ibayu, they ask a kasha ledivrea omer shirayim shechasu bein kmitza leaktara maktu komatzalen v'kaim dosen shirayim asurim ba'achila mau. The Tani Lu Aktar Lemikba Inu Bepigul V'Ka Inu Mide Me'ila. Do. Friends, if you remember recently, we had a machloikes. If I'm not mistaken, I didn't look it up. I just assumed that I remembered properly. So please correct me if I'm wrong. It was machloikes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish regarding if you took a komets from the mincha, but before you burnt the komets on the mizbeach, the shiarei mincha got depleted. The shirayim got depleted. They got depleted. They're no longer full. It's no longer a full isarun minus the komets. There's less than that now. So everyone agrees, whether you're a Yochanan, whether you're a Shlakish, everybody agrees that those shirayim may not be eaten by the Kohanim. Kohanim cannot eat the shirayim. Everyone agrees on that. No eating the shirayim. The machlokes is what happens to the komets. Rabbi Yochanan says, burn it. Rish Lakish says, don't burn it. Now here's the shaila. According to Rabbi Yechanan, who says burn it, what if he burns that kometz, and while he's burning the kometz, he has machshava, he has a thought to eat the shirayim, which is not allowed to eat. Everyone agrees you can't eat the shirayim; they're depleted. But he burns the kometz with the intention of eating the shirayim chutz lizmanu. He burns the kometz with the intention of eating the shirayim chutz lizmanu. The question is, would that be pigul? Would that be pigul? Because since you're allowed to burn the kometz, so you're doing a proper avoda, and when you burn the kometz, if you have machshavas chutz lizmanu, it'll be pigul. Or do we say that this is not something that is right? Davar she'ein dar kolechol, right? This would be davar she'ein dar kolechol, because everyone agrees you're not allowed to eat the shirayim, and therefore, right? We had said zeh klal kol she'ochel davar she'ein dar kolechol, right? We said at the top of today of the Amud over here today, Yud Beis Amud Aleph. This would be not dar kolechol since you're not allowed to eat it. So this is the question, Chaver. This is what we are going to have the privilege of struggling through for the next however long it takes us. This is the question, that when the kometz is separated and then the shirayim are depleted, and the kohen then burns the kometz with the intention of eating those depleted shirayim, which he's not allowed to eat, chutz lizmano, would burning that kometz with that intention make the korban pigul or not? Back in the Gemara again. According to the one who says, according to Yechanan, essentially who says, shirayim shechosru, that shirayim that became depleted, bein kmitza laktara, between the kmitza and the haktara, maktir kometz alein. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it says that you do burn the kometz, vikayim landos and shirayim asur b'achila, and of course everybody agrees that the shirayim are not allowed to be eaten. If the kometz is burnt with machsheves chutz lizmano, will it be pigul? Will the korban be pigul? V'lafkinu midei meila. Who wants to explain to everybody what that means? Well, korban mincha is kachikachin, which means that there's a din meila. You're not allowed to get benefit from it. It's a little bit unclear for me exactly what point you're not allowed to get benefit from it. My impression is from the time that it becomes kaddish from the klei sharis. Rashi, I think, however, had said something differently. I didn't. Where? Let's see. Okay. But yeah, once they become, so what does that mean? From the time they're set aside, or from the time that they're put in the klei sharis? My impression was that from the time that they're put in the klei sharis, right? We had also discussed recently that the isaron itself is a klei sharis, and because it's makdish, we had a whole shaila about if the isaron is makdish. Well, not really the isar, but whatever. Did we need also the oil and stuff? And then whatever it is. Okay, without getting into that, my impression was that the ingredients of the mincha become kadosh in the klei sharis, not necessarily from the time they're designated. Whatever it is, the fact of the matter is that a korban mincha becomes kadosh with kedushas haguf, and that if you get benefit from it, there's a din meila. Now, friends, here's the general rule when it comes to meila. So, for example, if you have a korban chatas, so korban chatas, from the time that you set it aside, is kadosh with kedushas haguf. Right? You go to a sheep and you say, you're going to be my korban chatas. So it's kadosh with kedushas haguf. And you can't get any benefit from it. You can't get any anah from it. If you accidentally get anah from it, you bring a korban asher me'ilos. At what point does the me'ilah go away? The answer is the me'ilah goes away after the zrikas adam. You bring the korban to the animal to the Beis Hamikdash, you do shchita and zrikas adam. After the zrikas adam, what happens? As we know, the zrikas adam is matir the emurin to be burnt on the mizbeach, as well as for the meat to go to the Kohanim. And that's what's called a Shas Heter La Kohanim. What that's called is that it becomes mutter for the Kohanim. And the halacha is, the general rule by Me'ilah is that once a korban has a Shas Heter La Kohanim, once a korban becomes mutter for the Kohanim to eat it and to benefit from it, the halachos of Me'ilah go away. So the question is over here, so the Isser of Me'ilah, of getting benefit from it, goes away. The thing over here is that this never has a Shas Heter La Kohanim. The issue over here is that this depleted shirayim, we said everybody agrees that nobody can eat it. The Kohanim can't eat it. So there is never a Shas Heter La Kohanim. So where were we? So right. So we said lefkinu midei me'ilah. So the question is, when burning this kometz, is it going to release the Isser Anah from it? By burning the kometz, so we're going to say, okay, now that the kometz is burnt, it's okay to get Anah from this mincha, or do we say that since there's no Shas Heter La Kohanim, because we said that nobody can eat these shiraim, so it remains Me'ilah. So these are the two questions that we have. By burning the kometz, can it make pigul? And by burning the kometz, would it release from Me'ilah? Amar Rav Huna. So we're going to see a machlokes between Rav Huna and Rava. We're going to see a machlokes between Rav Huna and Rava. And we are going to reference a machlokes in the Mishnah in Masechta Me'ilah. In the Mishnah in Masechta Me'ilah, the first parak of Masechta Me'ilah, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer. No, between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says that if you have, let's say, a korban chatas that was slaughtered, and its meat was taken out of the azar, it now becomes pasul biyotze. The shaila is, will zrikas adam be released me'ilah? Right? We have a korban chatas. Korban chatas is kosher kachim. There's a din me'ilah. You can't get any benefit from it. Once you have zrikas adam, that then it allows the meat to be eaten to the kohanim, shaset to the kohanim, and there's no longer din me'ilah. But in this case, since the blood was taken out of the azar, it became pasul, which means even after the zrikas adam, it's still pasul. There's no shaset to the kohanim. So Rabbi Akiva says, nonetheless, even this animal that became pasul biyotze, the zrikas adam will release the din me'ilah. And the Isra Anah. Rabbi Eliezer argues and says, nisht. This animal that became pasul biyotze prior to zrikas adam, the zrikas adam will not release the din me'ilah, the Isra Anah. There was never a shaset to the kohanim. It was pasul biyotze at the time of zrikas adam, and the Isra Anah is not released. Now, says Rav Huna, afilu l'Rabbi Akiva damar zrika mo'eles liyotze. So it says Rav Huna that even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that when you have this animal that was pasul biyotze prior zrikas adam, the zrikas adam will release the din me'ilah from it. That, however, is by this animal, because the animal is here. It was yotze, but it's here. The issue isn't with the animal itself. The animal itself is completely fine. The issue is something external, which is somebody schlepped it out of the azar. That's what the issue is. But the animal itself is fine. But argues Rav Huna that when it comes to our depleted shiare hamincha, the psula de gufahu, the mincha itself is deficient, is issue full. Lo mahane le, Haktara argues Rav Huna, Haktara is not going to help over here. Haktara's akometz is not going to release anything from Me'ilah. Argues Rav Huna, even according to Akiva, who says that by Yotze, the Zrikas Adam will release the me'ilah from the korban that was Yotze, outside of the Azar? Argues Rav Huna, not so by our korban mincha that's been depleted, which is an issue in the korban itself. And even after the aktar, there will still be a din mila. Even after the aktar sakomets, Rava argues punkt fakert. Punkt fakert. Omele Rava says adraba fakert. Afilu Reb Eliezer, even according to Rabbi Akiva's bar plukta Rabbi Eliezer, his Rebbe, de Omar ein zrika moeles layotze, who says that when it comes to an animal that was taken out of the azara, Zrika Saddam is not going to help. However, over here, Hanimile Yotze Delesa Bifnim. Yeah, that's an issue by Yotze because it's not in the Azara with us. Aval Chisar and the Ise Bifnim. But in our case, of the Shirayim that became depleted, but everything's still in the Azara, Mahanile Aktara. Aktara would work and it would release the Isra'ano and any potential for me'ilah, and also it would be pigul. It would be an effective zrika sadam. It would be an effective zrika sadam. It would release me'ilah and it can affect pigul. Argues Rava. So we have a machlekes between Rav Huna and Rava, which is a very unique machlekes because completely different generations. I don't even know that Rava and Rav Huna overlapped. I can't say for sure, but I believe, right, there's that Gemara in Kiddushin, I believe, which says that when Rav Yehuda was born, who was a contemporary Rav Huna, when Rav Yehuda died, Rava was born. I mean, Rava's Rebbe was, he had more than one Rebbe, but Rava's Rebbeim were Rabba and Rav Yosef. Although, Rava's Rebbe was also Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman was the same generation of Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna, so maybe he did. But still, this is still a unique machlekes. Rava usually would argue with Abaye. He would ask questions to Rav Nachman, to Rabba, Rav Yosef. He wouldn't really argue on Rav Huna. I think that's unique. Okay. There was a Gemara Masechta Shabbos where Rava, I think, argued with Rav Yehuda and then he regretted it. I should look that one up. It's a good one. I was thinking about it. I think about it from time to time, that one. I'll call upon him. So machlokes between Rava and Rav Huna. Now Rav Huna had said that the burning of the komets is going to be ineffective, whereas Rava says the burning of the komets will be effective, and it will cause pigul, and it will remove me'ilah. Omar Rava says, Rava, mino aminala. Okay, here's where things kick up a notch, friends. This becomes really hard. I can only say, oh boy, with somewhere between 50% and 90% feeling of, I understand this. Like, this is really tricky stuff. Very subtle and tricky stuff. I spent a few hours, I say I probably spent a few hours trying to figure out, like, this one line coming up in like 3 lines. And even after a few hours, I read Rashi over and over, slept on it for a few hours, woke up, tried to figure it out again, slept on it for another few hours, woke up, tried to figure it out again, read the art school a few times. It's tricky stuff. Rava says, Rava, how do I know that the komets is effective? Here we go. It's not that we learn in our Mishnah, a komets is a mincha. Somebody takes a komets from a korban mincha. Now, friends, notice that in our Mishnah, if we just look back to the opposite Amud, at the bottom of Yud Aleph Mebez, it says, "Hakomis is a mincha lecho sharia b'chutz, or kazai misharia b'chutz, like tikomsa b'chutz, or kazai da 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 da." The opening section of our Mishnah is, even though pigul could be caused by kimitza, nesina b'kli, holacha, aktara, the opening section of our Mishnah focuses only on one of those steps, and that is kmitza. It's only in the next section where it says Zeh klal kol hakometz onosim bechli amol lechamakta. That's only where we talk about the other steps. Now, that's important. So now Amar Rava says Rav Menon Mina la Ditnan, that we learned in our Mishnah, kometz es mincha. Somebody who separates a kometz from a korban mincha, right? Just quoting our Mishnah. Lechol sharia b'chutz, in order to eat the shirayim b'chutz, okay? And I mean, same thing also. Chutzim komu, chutzim zmano, ki l'machar would be pigul, b'chutz would be pasul. Okay. Here's the key. O kazayis misharia b'chutz. In our Mishnah, we also mentioned the kazayis. So our Mishnah says, anybody who takes a kometz from a korban mincha, with the intention of eating the shiaria mincha b'chutz, or even just the kazayis b'chutz, so then it'll be pasul. And if it's l'machar, it'll be achiyuv kares. Now, if you notice by the Zeh Klal, when it talks about kometz, so no saying b'kli amolech v'amak, it doesn't say anything about this kazayis. Only by the kometz does it mention or a kazayis of it. It doesn't say anything by the other avodas, by the nesina b'kli, by the holacha, by the aktar. It doesn't say anything about a kazayis there. Now, Vitani Reb Chia, now Reb Chia, he teaches, I assume the point is that he's teaching in his Tosefta, he's teaching the same halacha as our Mishnah is, but he leaves out the kazayis part from the first section of the Mishnah, so that it's consistent with the Zeh Klal, that when we introduce the Nesina B'Kli and the Olacha and the Aktara, and when we say the Zeh Klal, we don't say anything about a kazayis. So in Reb Chia's version, it's consistent with the opening section, which talks about the kometz, where Reb Chia leaves out the kazayis as well. Whereas Rebbe in our Mishnah talks about whether the intention is to eat the whole shirayim or even just the kazayis of it. Reb Chia leaves out the even just the kazayis part. And the assumption is here not because Reb Chia disagrees with Rebbe. Reb Chia agrees with Rebbe, but for other considerations, which we'll get to in just a second. But Reb Chia teaches the same thing but leaves out the kazayis. HaKometz is mincha. Somebody takes a kometz from a mincha, v'lo tani o kazayis. Right? He says somebody takes a kometz from a mincha with the intention of eating the shiori mincha b'chutz, but he doesn't say anything about or just the kazayis of it. My timer. Now, how come? My timer lo tani o kazayis. Why doesn't he mention the kazayis? And again, as I said a minute ago, the assumption is that Reb Chia agrees with Rebbe. He didn't leave it out because he disagrees with Rebbe. He left it out because lav, is it not because kigon shechosru shirayim v'kamlu akazayis. Rather, it's because our Mishnah, as well as Reb Chia's Brisa, we're saying that Rebbe and Reb Chia are talking about the same scenario, and they also agree in principle. They just disagreed about how they should describe it and what they should include in their versions, but that they are both talking about our scenario. A scenario where the kometz was separated from the mincha, the shirayim were depleted, and now the shaila is about burning the kometz with the intention of eating the shirayim chutz limkamo. And the shaila is, well, okay, and then we'll get, well, I'm just saying it's pigul, but anyways, we'll get there in a second. So we want to say that Reb Chia and Rebbe are both talking about our exact scenario. We're talking about a scenario where the kometz was taken from the mincha, the shirayim were then depleted, and now when burning the kometz, we want to know if there will be any pigul or not. No. So once again, so therefore, now at the time that the kometz was taken, the shirayim were not yet depleted, right? As we learned in Testament base, that if at the time of the kometz there is less than an isar and it's going to be pasul. So therefore, the first step in the Mishnah, when it talks about separating the komets, there's still a full shear there. And therefore, we could be talking about, he takes the komets with the intention of eating the shirayim, or even just a kazayis of the shirayim. Now, Reb Chia chooses to leave that out. But at that point, though, nothing has been depleted yet. So when he takes the komets, our Mishnah could potentially be talking about, and our Mishnah does talk about, Reb Chia chooses not to, says that when the komets is taken, since at that point there's still the full shear, the komets is taken with the intention of eating the shirayim, or even just a kazayis of it, chutz l'mkom, chutz l'zmano. Now, after the komets, that's when the shirayim gets depleted, which is now when we get up to the Zeh HaKlal, which is talking about now the Nesina B'Kli, the Holach Al HaMizbeach, the Aktara. At this point now, we're already talking about a depleted shirayim. Right, so lav kigon shechasu shirayim, the shirayim are lacking. V'kamulu kazayis. Now all you have less is kazayis for the Nesina B'Kli, Holach Al HaMizbeach, being maktir the komets. B'maton kli behiluch uvaktara, and therefore, since by the time we get up to the Nesina B'Kli, the Holach Al HaMizbeach, the Aktara, since we get up to those, when we get up to those stages, we're already depleted and down to just the kazayis. Lo masnile o kazayis ashirayim, and therefore in those stages we are not going to say, or a kazayis is left by the shirayim, because the shirayim are already down to a kazayis, right? Right at this point, right? So in the opening section of the Mishnah, when we talk about the komets, at that point you still have a full isaron, and we could talk about whether the kavanah at that point was to eat all of the shirayim chutz lizmano or chutz l'mkomo, or even just a kazayis of it. But by the time we get up to the next three stages, the shirayim are already down to kazayis, or been depleted down to kazayis. And you're not going to say down to kazayis for the shirayim are already down to kazayis. And if you were to say about the komets, which is now being taken up to the mizbeach, if you were going to say a kazayis of that, then I think the point is that would imply that, like the shirayim, even if they also were to get depleted down to a kazayis at the time of, let's say, the aktara, but that would be puzzle. So therefore, we can't talk about the kazayis aspect when it comes to the Nesina B'Kli Holach Al HaMizbeach Aktara. And we leave that out when it comes to Zeh HaKlal, right? When it comes to Zeh HaKlal, we say Kol HaKomets Onosim B'Kli Hamolech V'Amaktir Lecho Davar Shadar Lecho, etc. No, we don't say anything about, or even just a kazayis of it at that point, because we want to say at that point all that's left is a kazayis, and all that's left of the shirayim is a kazayis, and therefore we can't say anything about a kazayis for the shirayim. And it's complicated to say it about the other steps, because then that maybe implies that the komets itself is depleted down to kazayis, which would be a problem and make the whole korban puzzle. Therefore, there's nothing to talk about Pigul. So therefore, b'kmitza nami lecho shirayim lo tani o kazayis. Therefore, Reb Chia opted to say that since by the Nesina B'Kli Holach Al HaMizbeach Haktara, you couldn't mention the down to a kazayis thing, so Reb Chia chose for consistency that even in the opening section of his brisa, to say hakometz as a mincha lecho she'orea b'chutz, but leaving out the kazayis thing because that's inconsistent with the other steps. That's the hard part. Let's go on for a second. V'katani seifa, and what do we say in our Mishnah or in Reb Chia's brisa? Pigul v'chayav and olive karis. We say that it would be pigul. So that whole elaborate, very subtle discussion that we just had was to make the argument that our Mishnah is talking about the scenario that that the Gemara brought up, which is what happens when after the komets has been taken and the shirayim become depleted, would the burning of the mincha, would the burning of the kometz make the korban pigul? Rava wants to bring our Mishnah as a proof to say that that's exactly the case that our Mishnah is talking about, and it says that it would be pigul. So after that whole complicated thing with Rebbe, Reb Chia, and all the complicated stuff, and the kometz, and all sorts of stuff, the point being, Rava wants to argue from our Mishnah that our Mishnah is talking about the exact scenario of when the shiraim gets depleted after the kometz, and our Mishnah nonetheless says that burning of the kometz would affect pigul. So therefore Rava wants to say that our Mishnah is therefore a proof, our Mishnah and Reb Chia's Brisa are therefore a proof that the kometz would affect pigul in this scenario when the shiuria mincha become depleted after the kometz. Amalei Abaye. However, Abaye has a different perspective on this. And Abaye says to Rav, the olam lo mahanya, that really, Abaye says like Rav Huna, that the burning of the kometz is ineffective. That the burning of the kometz in this scenario will not make any pigul. That the burning of the kometz in this scenario will not make pigul. Hamani Rebbe Lazarhi, and therefore we are not talking about this. Our Mishnah is not talking about. Our Mishnah is not talking about this scenario where the kometz was depleted. No. The reason why Reb Chia leaves out the kazayas thing is not because we're talking about where the kometz got depleted after the where the shiraim got depleted after the kometz. We're not talking about that. Rather simply, Hamani Reb Elazari, Reb Chia's brisa references, right, is the opinion of Reb Elazar, which we saw in Masechta Zvachim by Shchutei Chutz. It's not that we learned in a Mishnah, Masechta Zvachim HaKometz v'Alevona. So the kometz, right, we're talking about Shchutei Chutz. So somebody burns a kometz of a mincha, v'Alevona, or Levona, v'Aktores, u'minchas kohanim. As we know, all korban minchas of kohanim, if they donate a mincha to the Beis Hamikdash, there's no kometz, it's all burnt. U'minchas kohen Mashiach, the minchas chavitin, u'minchas nisachim, menachos that are brought with korbanos. Shikuv me'achas men kazayis b'chutz chayv. Says the Tanakama, if even just a kazayis of these were offered b'chutz, you're chayv for amale b'chutz. For Rabbi Elazar poter ach yaakov kulo, whereas Rabbi Elazar says, in order to be chayv, you're going to have to offer all of it. In order to be chayv, you're going to have to offer all of it. So therefore, Reb Chia's brisa is a reference to Reb Elazar's opinion, and that's why he leaves out the kazayas thing, because Reb Chia's brisa is saying, like Reb Elazar, that you have to burn the whole thing. And therefore, when it comes to pigul, you'd have to take the kometz with the intention of eating the shiraim bachutz, not just a kometz, not just a kazayis of it. V'chevon de b'kmitza lo masni lei o kazayis mikumtza bachutz, and therefore, since by the since by the kometz, Rabbi Elazar holds that you'd have to burn, the intention would have to be to burn the whole kometz bachutz. So therefore, and not just the kazayis of it. So also that's why, also when it comes to the shiraim as well, b'shiraim nami lo masni lei o kazayis. That's also why, not just by the kometz, but also by the shiraim, Reb Chia's brisa doesn't say anything about the kazayis. In fact, the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, if we're saying that the brisa is Rabbi Elazar, the Reb Chia's brisa is Rabbi Elazar, but 1 second. Then why is it just saying to burn the kometz bachutz? You would have to burn, even just burning the whole kometz alone would not be chayiv according to Rabbi Elazar. You'd have to burn not just the kometz, but also the levona, the tan that we learn in a Mishnah, also in Masechtas Zvachim. Kometz v'levona shehikri ves echod mem bachutz chayiv. Rabbi Elazar poter, that when you have kometz and levona and just one of the two are burnt bachutz, so the Tanakama says poter chayiv. Rabbi Elazar poter. Achiyagav is shneim. Right? The Tanakama says you'd be chayiv for offering just one of them. Rabbi Elazar says you're only going to be chayiv if you offer both of them, not just one of them. So nitzcha lo nitzcha el lekometz de minchas chote. Well, Rav Chia's brayso is Rabbi Elazar, but the reason why you'd be chayiv for only the chometz, right, the chometz for having the intention of burning just the chometz bachutz, the reason you'd be chayiv for that is because we're talking about minchas chote where there is no levona. Really? You think that the Tana is talking specifically about a minchas chote? Why limit it to just that? Yes, he is in fact talking about just a minchas chote. V'chein ki also Rav Dimi Amar Belazar. Then Rav Dimi came. He said, "Taka according to Belazar, kometz the minchas chote who Belazar." That we're talking about the minchas chote. That is the opinion of Belazar, and that is why we don't say anything about just the kazayis, but rather burning the whole kometz, and also we don't say anything about the levona because it's a minchas chote. Okay, so givaldig, wow. We've seen a lot here. This is complicated, but we've seen a lot. We saw the opinion of Rav Huna, so we brought up the question about when the shiraim gets depleted after the kometz, and the question is when you burn the kometz, is it going to affect pigul? Rav Huna says no. Rava says yes. He wants to bring a raya from our Mishnah to say that that's exactly what our Mishnah is talking about, and he says that it'll be pigul. So he wants to bring a raya from our Mishnah. Abaye argues with Rava and says no, our Mishnah is not talking about this scenario when it becomes depleted after the kometz. Rather, our Mishnah is just talking about a regular korban mincha and a regular kmitza. And in terms of why Reb Chia doesn't say anything about a kazai, it's because he's expressing the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Hada Amaravit Lav Milsli the Amri. Rava then changed his mind. He says, you know what? Actually, pigul is not gonna the burning the kometz is not going to affect pigul. It's not going to affect meila. Like Rav Huna says, Lav Milsli the Amri. I changed my mind. The Tana that we learned in the Brayso, Kodesh Kodashim Hu. It says by the lechem aponim. That it is Kodesh Kodashim She'im Nifrisa Achas Mechalosel Kulam Psulas. That if any of the chalas became broken, if any of the lechem aponim became broken, they are all puzzle. They are all puzzle. Hayotzas Hanidika Gavoy Ksheris. However, so we're saying if any of them broke, send puzzle, but if one of them was, let's say, Yotze, so then the burning of the bazichin, the aktaras bazichin, from the lechem aponim, when the frankincense is burned, so then the ones that remained inside I imagine it's talking about the azara. I don't know, it's talking about the heichal, it's talking about the azara. I assume it's talking about the azara. So the ones that remained inside are kosher. The one that went outside will I guess you won't be able to be that one, but it would still be considered like all the breads are there, to the extent that the haktaras bazichin would allow the ones that were inside to be able to be eaten. Man shamas le da'amar zrika mo'eles liyotze. Who's the one who says, remember from the Mishnah that the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer that we saw earlier from the Mishnah in Me'ila, whose opinion was it that Zrika Saddam would allow, would release the din Me'ila for a korban that was Yotze? Rabbi Akiva. The Ka'amar, nonetheless, he's saying Nifrisa lo. Nonetheless, he's saying if any of the breads got broken, the Aktaras Bazichin will not fix that. I.e., when something is lacking, it can't be fixed. And therefore, in our example, when the Sharia Mincha are depleted, the Aktaras Akometz will not be able to fix it. So therefore, Rava does a 180 and he says, you know what? I wanted to argue that even according to, I wanted to argue that even Rabbi Eliezer would say that when it comes to the burning of the komets, it would be able to release the me'ila, right, the Isra Noah from the Sharei Ha-Mincha, as well as affect Pigul. But says Rava, I see not, because even Rabbi Kiva, who would normally say that the Zrikas Adam would release Pigul, but would release the Isra Noah when it comes to Yotzei, he would nonetheless say that when it's depleted, when the lechem upon him are broken, the burning of the bezichin can't fix that. So here also, when the sharia mincha are depleted, the burning of the komets will not be able to fix it. Amalei Abaye, but Abaye says to Rave, mikatani ha-yotzos, but one second, it doesn't explicitly say that by Yotzei it would be possible, right? Meaning all we said by the lechem upon him is that if one of them was broken, so then there's nothing you can do about it. Rava then wanted to imply that if it was Yotzei, so then we want to say that if it was Yotzei, so then the burning of the Bazikim would allow at least the ones that are inside, i.e. that it's fixable, and therefore we wanted to say that it's Rabbi Kiva, and still the broken one, there's nothing you can do about it. However, Abai points out that it doesn't say that explicitly in the Brisa. It doesn't say that explicitly in the Brisa. Therefore, maybe the implication is not that Yotzei would be okay, and therefore it's Rabbi Kiva, but rather, ha-nitmes hanoch ksheros. Rather say what it means, if one of them becomes tamei, the rest of them are still kosher. My time in the Mratza tzitz, because in the base of Mikdash there's a tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wears, and that would be Mratza, and that will fix the tumah. Aval Yotzei's low, but we could say that if one of them was Yotzei, it would also be unfixable, and actually Rabbi Eliezer, it's actually Rabbi Eliezer and not Rabbi Akiva, the Omar, Ein Zrika Mo'elis Liyotzei, that Zrika Saddam cannot fix an animal that was Yotzei, and also the burning of the Bazichim will not fix any of the breads that were Yotzei, and therefore they'll all be possible. So, really, you could say it's actually, so Rava wanted to make his whole argument by saying, wow, okay, I'm stuck because this must be Rabbi Akiva, and still he's saying that the broken ones can't be fixed. Yet Abai says you could actually argue that this is Rabbi Eliezer. And the reason why uvedinu the lemisne nami yitzia yotzos, and really in principle it could have also said that yotzos is also possible, not just when it breaks. Katani nifrasa, the reason why we specifically talking about when the breads break, right? There's that whole thing breaking breads. That's a whole tumult now. Something called breaking breads. Doesn't sound like a very nice thing that they're trying to do over there. Katani nifrasa. The reason why it's talking about breaking breads, hopefully in the zchus of talking about breaking breads for kedusha Masechta Menachos, the breaking breads in New York City will go away. V'hayde katani nifrasa hakamaj malan de afilu nifrasa de isei bifnim lo ma'anya le aktar. The reason why it's talking about breaking breads is to say that afilu nifrasa de isei bifnim, even though it's in the azar or the heichol, when it breaks, lo ma'anya le aktar, still the aktar's bazichin will not fix it. But you could argue though that this has nothing to do with Rabbi Kiva, and maybe Rabbi Kiva would say, right, Rabbi Kiva, who says that Zrika Saddam could work for Yotzei, he could also say that the burning of the Bazichin could work for the broken breads. And Abai says, look, maybe this isn't, maybe Rava, you could still maintain your position. Wow, was that a tricky Gemara? Okay, so in the last step over here, Rava changed his mind. Abai says, you don't necessarily need to change your mind if you don't want to. Okay, sheesh. Moving on to the next Mishnah. Wow. Ending off the first parak of Masechta Menachos with Pigul is like Masechta Menachos just reminding us, if we thought that maybe it was going to be a little bit of a lighter version of Zvachim, don't be so sure. Don't underestimate. We should not underestimate what Menachos has in store for us. Friends, for the final section of today's daf and for the final section of the first parak of Menachos. The Pigul marriage between burning and eating, says the Mishnah, Le'echol chatzi zayis v'lahaktir chatzi zayis kosher she'en achila v'aktar mitzdarfin. Also, we should be familiar with this from Masechta Zvachim, that if the Kohen separates the kometz with the intention of eating half a zayis of the shirayim and burning half and burning, I guess, half of a zayis of the kometz, I guess. So, right, bachutz or chutzuzmanu, chutzumkomo, they will not join together, right? You don't have a proper share of anything, right? When it comes to pigul, there's achilas adam and achilas mizbeach, right? Achilas adam would be the shirayim, achilas mizbeach would be the kometz. So, if he has intention only to, right, he has intention, I'm going to eat half a zayis, chutzuzmanu, and burn half a zayis of the kometz chutzuzmanu, they won't join together to make a kazayis because achila and haktara are not mitzdarf, they don't join together. Lechol kachatzi zayis, v'hakir chatzi zayis kosher she'ena achila v'aktar mitzdarfin. The eating and the burning don't join together. Taima the lechol v'lahaktir. Says the Gemara, the reason why these two zayises don't join together is because apples and oranges, eating and burning. Halechol v'lechol. But if we're talking about eating and eating, even if we're talking about davar she'ein darko lechol, even something that you wouldn't normally eat. So let's say we're talking about eating half a kazayis of shirayim, plus eating another half a kazayis of the kometz. Now, the kometz is not something that you're meant to eat. Mitzdarif will join together because they're both eating. But, friends, Vakatani Resha, we learned earlier on today by the Zeh cloud that we've referenced a few times, Lechol davar shedarko lechol, v'la'aktir davar shedarko la'aktir. That you're chayiv for pigul when you're talking about eating something that is normally eaten, or burning something that's normally burnt, but not to eat a kometz. Davar shedarko lechol in, we said in that rule in the previous Mishnah that you're only going to be chayiv for pigul for things that are normally eaten. You're not chayiv for pigul if it's something that is not normally eaten. Mantana. So the Gemara answers, well, who's the author of our Mishnah? Who's the author of our Mishnah from which we are implying that eating things that are not normally eaten you'd be chayiv for? So the Tana of this Mishnah disagrees with the Tana of the previous Mishnah. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mani Rabbi Eliezer. It's Rabbi Eliezer the Amr who says mechajru mechilas adam mechilas mizbech, that you can have an intention of burning the shiara mincha and the mizbech, for example, which are normally supposed to be eaten, mechilas mizbech lechilas adam, or eating a kometz which is normally supposed to be burnt. It's not that we learn in the Mishnah. A kometz is a mincha. Somebody who takes a kometz from a mincha, lechol davar she'ein darko lechol, with the intention of eating something that's not normally eaten, or to burn something that is not normally burned. Kosher. Rabbi Eliezer posel. So the Tanakama says kosher because since it's not normally eaten or not normally burnt, so there's no pigul. But Rabbi Eliezer says posel because there is a pigul concern. So you could say that our Mishnah is Dafka Rabbi Eliezer, which is why the implication is that a half a zayis of eating, half a zayis of shiarei mincha and a half a zayis of kometz could join together, because it's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, even though it's not normally eaten, even though the kometz is not normally eaten. Abaye Omer says, Abaye, afilu temer rabbanon. You can even say that the author of our Mishnah is the Rabbanon, the same Rabbanon as the previous Mishnah as well. Don't say that the implication of the Mishnah is that a half a zayis of shiarei mincha and a half a zayis of kometz can join together. No, don't say that. As we learned earlier in the previous Mishnah, you're not chai for eating a kometz. Ella, ema halechol v'lechol davol shedarko. Wait, what did it say? Halechol v'lechol davol shedarko. So ella ema, rather I'll say halechol v'lechol davol shedarko lechol. Rather I'll say that joining together to eat things that are normally eaten. Umay kamash malon. Well, what's it telling us? No, we already learned that in the previous Mishnah explicitly, that if he takes a kometz from the mincha with the intention of eating a kazayis chutz l'mkomo, or a kazayis chutz l'zmano, kazayis l'mocha, kazayis b'chutz, or kazayis chutz l'zmano, kazayis chutz l'mkomo, kazayis kachatzi zayis b'chutz, kachatzi zayis l'mocha, or a half a zayis b'chutz, or a half a zayis the macher, i.e. the same things, right? Both half a zayis of the shirayim the macher, half a kazayis b'chutz. Kachazayis l'mak, kazayis b'chutz. Pasul ben bakaris. Right? We already talked about this in the previous Mishnah. Meaning, whereas over here we're saying that a half a zayis, to eat half a zayis and to burn half a zayis don't join together. We're saying, but to eat half a zayis chutz l'zmano and half a zayis chutz l'mkomo, they will join together to the extent of at least being possible. We know that already from our previous Mishnah, said it explicitly. No. So what's the deal? So we're a little bit stuck because we're saying that if it's saying that a half a zayis, to eat a half a zayis and to burn a half a zayis don't join together, but to eat a half a zayis of shirayim and a half a zayis of the komets, we already know from the previous Mishnah, we said that they don't join together because they're not normally, the komets is not normally eaten. Ilechol, let's skip the parentheses. There's a lot of parentheses here. Skip them all. Ilechol v'lahaktir. And if we're saying, if the Mishnah is simply teaching us that eating half a zayis and burning half a zayis simply just don't join together, they're incompatible. But midyuka dereisha shmas mina. But we don't need the Mishnah to teach us because we can already infer that from the previous Mishnah. Because if after all the previous Mishnah said that to eat half a zayis of shirayim and half a zayis of komets don't join together because it's not the komets is not normally eaten, obviously eating half a zayis and burning half a zayis are apples and oranges. They certainly can't be joined together. Actually, I would have a havmini to say that they can be joined together. Lecho v'lahaktir, it's strichale. We actually do need our Mishnah to tell us that half a zayis of eating and half a zayis of burning don't join together. I may have thought hasam u delo ki orche kamechashiv. Look, when we're talking about eating half a zayis of shirayim and half a zayis of komets, the komets is not. You're not supposed to eat the komets. There's something abnormal about that equation. But in this case, it is actually very normal. It's apples and oranges, but a very healthy pink lady apple that was grown in Eretz Yisrael, and one of those beautiful ori kind of clementines that are just mind-blowing, those kind of apples and oranges that you buy in Shuk Machne Yehuda. So I may have thought that when it comes though to half a zayis of shirayim and half a zayis of eating half a zayis of shirayim and burning half a zayis of komets, which those you're eating what you're supposed to be eating, you're burning what you're supposed to be eating. Maybe they can join together to make a kazayis kamashmon. Therefore, we need our teacher, our Mishnah to say that they don't join together. Hadron Allah Kol Menachos. We'll come back to Perek Kol Menachos. Chevre, that was Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Menachos, and with that we complete the first Perek of Masechta Menachos. Chevre, Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Menachos was a difficult one. All about Pigul. Pigul was back, big gadol. We learned a big Mishnah on Yud Beis and Aleph that took up about 3/4 of Yud Beis and Aleph, all about Pigul for Menachos. I'm not going to go through all those scenarios, but there were I don't know that there was actually really much that was new I think it was basically just an adaptation of Mishnayos from Zvachim that we applied to Menachos. We discussed Pigul when the leftovers are depleted. Rav Huna said, no, Pigul, you're not going to burn the burning of the komets is not going to make Pigul, nor will it release the Isra Anah. Whereas Rava says, yes, it will make Pigul and it will release the Isra Anah, though Rava in the end kind of backtracked. Abai tried to talk him out of it. And the Pigul marriage between burning and eating half a zayis of leftovers and half a zayis of komets do not join together. Friends, that was Daf Yud Beis, Masechta Menachos. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great Shabbos. Cheers.